Day 16, the aftermath. Morning arrived in a grim silence. The zombies had dispersed, leaving the house in ruins. Angie and Julio were safe, but Jay's left arm was a mangled mess. He had no choice. He'd need to amputate. With Angie's help, they made a makeshift tourniquet and disinfected a knife as best they could. Jay bit down on a cloth as Angie severed the arm just below the shoulder, his vision going dark with pain. Jay spent the next few days recovering, his strength returning slowly. Angie and Julio stayed with him, the three of them forming a bond over their shared survival. Day 20. Building a new arm. Jay was determined to keep fighting, even if he'd lost an arm. He scavenged through his supplies, pulling together scraps of metal, bolts, and spare parts from tools he'd gathered. With Angie's help, he fashioned a crude prosthetic arm, complete with a hook on one end and a solid grip he could wield in close combat. The arm wasn't perfect, but it was better than being defenseless. Jay felt a strange satisfaction in his creation. It was a symbol of his survival, his resilience. Day 21. Moving forward. Jay, Angie, and Julio knew that staying in the house wasn't an option anymore. They'd survived this wave, but they needed to find safer shelter. Together, they packed what supplies they had left, Jay adjusting to the weight and balance of his new arm, and set out into the uncertain world, a small family bound by loss, grit, and an iron determination to survive. Day 1826. 5 years later. The world had changed, settled into a strange new equilibrium. Cities were mostly empty, reclaimed by nature and the dead that wandered them. Small pockets of survivors carved out safer spaces, usually hidden deep in forests or abandoned rural areas. Jay, Angie, and Julio had become part of one of those rare enclaves known as the Hollow, a community built into an abandoned train station nestled within a dense forest. Its hidden location and reinforced defenses kept most of the undead away, and for 5 years it had been home. Jay stood at the edge of the Hollow, his homemade arm upgraded over the years with pieces scavenged from every abandoned place he'd come across. Julio, now 15, was at his side. He had grown into a sharp, resourceful young man who had learned every skill Jay could teach: tracking, hunting, combat, and the quiet strength that survival demanded. Angie, now an integral leader in the community, worked in the Hollow's central hub, organizing food supplies and overseeing scouting missions. The community thrived under Angie's leadership, her tactical sense invaluable to keeping the Hollow safe and well-stocked. She had even helped other survivors find their way to them, creating a small network with other safe enclaves nearby. But every now and then, the weight of those they had lost showed in her eyes, Tony especially, who had been her oldest friend. Ready to head out? Julio's voice brought Jay back to the present. They had a supply run to make, but today's trip had a special mission: rumors of a functional generator at an old hospital miles from the Hollow. "Let's get going," Jay said, smiling as he saw the quiet confidence in Julio's stance. They moved through the forest together, quiet as shadows, scanning for signs of movement. After all these years, even a stray zombie was still a danger, but Julio moved with the calm control Jay had drilled into him, and Jay's prosthetic was a perfected blend of strength and precision. Where once he'd feared it as a loss, it was now a part of him, a badge of survival. As they approached the hospital, a small horde stumbled through the parking lot. Without a word, Jay and Julio fell into a practiced rhythm, dispatching the undead one by one. When the way was clear, they slipped into the hospital, moving from room to room, gathering medical supplies. In the basement, they found the generator, dusty but miraculously intact. Julio tinkered with it, his hands deftly working the controls, a skill Angie had taught him long ago. The generator whirred to life, filling the quiet air with a soft hum. "Think we can get it back to the Hollow?" Julio asked, a rare glint of excitement in his eyes. Jay patted his shoulder. "We'll find a way. This'll make a big difference." On the way back, they spoke in low voices about the future, the next projects, the expansions they could make with the generator's power. They were almost home when Jay stopped abruptly, looking out over the valley where they could see the entrance to the hollow, the place they had built with their hands, their sacrifices, and the memories of those they'd lost. He took a deep breath, gratitude filling him for the home they had forged. That night, the community gathered around a makeshift fire pit as Jay and Julio brought in the generator, receiving cheers and words of thanks. Angie looked at him, her eyes bright with pride, and gave him a nod. 5 years ago, Jay had thought he was destined to face the apocalypse alone, but he had found a family. Together, they had carved out a life, a future in the midst of ruins. As Jay looked around at his family and friends, he felt hope, a reminder that even in the darkest places, life could grow back, strong and unbreakable. And so they pressed forward, day by day, together.